All right, everybody, this is James with Quantum Mechanic. Today I'm going to be talking about electrical repair, and we're going to talk a little bit about the tools you need, and then I'm going to talk about some techniques as well, and some of the things that I've used to make me a lot of money and save a lot of time, okay? So first and foremost is going to be these multimeters. I talked about this in the past. These multimeters live in that, one of them lives in that toolbox there, another one lives in that toolbox. I love them so much. I have two of them. So anyway, these are absolutely fantastic. I just want to go real quickly through some of the features of this multimeter. I mean, I'm sure you guys know how to read one, but I will do it anyway. So obviously we have voltage here to test voltage. And what's great about these leads here is that these two leads are for everything. And they're kind of auto ranging. And the only thing it's not for is this 10 amp right here. So you'll have to, the fuse 10 amp port, so you have to switch it over. But other than that, so anyway, obviously you can test for voltage, right? That says battery load test, but not really. For a battery load test, you really need something like that, which is a battery load tester. That's a really basic one you can get for super cheap. That's what I use. Anyhow, we can also test DC voltage, right? Obviously, right? That's the auto ranging bit of it. We can test AC voltage, which is really nice. Don't ever try to test AC voltage or DC voltage on the wrong setting. And then some of the multimeters, they'll have like, 5 or 6 ports down here. And I have seen it in my life many times where technicians are trying to test for DC voltage, but they're on the AC voltage setting, right? So that's kind of, embarrassing. So this is resistance. This is probably the most important one. Resistance is super important for testing like continuity in wires, checking for grounds and stuff like that. So as you can see right now, it says overload. When I pinch them together, it says 0. So that's good. This is also really good for testing sensors, right? If a sensor is supposed to have like 1.2 kilo ohms or whatever, you can use this to test that. Next, this is for check. I don't really use these two all that much, but this one I use a lot. This is very similar to resistance. This is kind of what I use to check for grounds. This is nice because it gives an audible beep. So if I'm checking for fuses, the way I check for fuses is when the fuse is in the fuse holder like this, I take my meter and I take my my prongs and I put one on top of each side, okay? That's how I test fuses. Now, you could obviously check fuses a number of different ways, but that's how I do it. And I check for resistance because when I can hear that audible beep across, like that, you can hear an audible beep across, and it's very rarely not reliable. And what I mean by that is it's possible when you check the fuse for there to be a ground on both sides of the fuse, and the fuse will be blown, but it'll still give you good continuity because you're checking essentially ground on both sides. But it's highly unlikely, and if you do suspect a fuse, the best thing is to take it out and bench test it. So I'm just going to show you guys. You can obviously tell that these fuses are blown, right? That's obvious, right? And imagine if you had to take each one of these fuses out and look at it. It's such a pain. But obviously it's not going to pass, right? It's not going to pass the continuity test. But what I really want to show you guys, this one will, because it's, see that? It actually passes the continuity test. That's because this fuse right here is oversized. So this is a 30 amp fuse I found. This is probably supposed to have a 15 amp or a 10 amp in there, and somebody was tired of it blowing, so they put something like this in. This is really dangerous. This is how you start fires, okay? All right, but this one here, this one's unique. Look at that. You can tell that it's blown, but only just barely, okay? If we compare it, the only thing you can really tell is the black mark on it, right? So that's why I like to use a multimeter, because you could have a hairline fracture like this one does. You could have a hairline fracture in the fuse and not obviously blown. And if you have a hairline fracture in the fuse, obviously it's not going to pass. So let's just test that one out real quick. Boom, and it fails, okay? So stuff like this, like checking fuses, that should be the very first thing that you do when you work on vehicles, right? Is testing the fuses. Anytime you have a diagnostic, that's nearly the first thing I do. It saves me so much time and money. There's been, I can't even count the number of times where I've replaced a fuse, got a customer on the road, and they've been like, oh, my car's been sitting for 9 months. It's been through 6 different mechanic shops, and they've thrown $3,000 of parts on it and blah, blah, blah. And all it was is a fuse. So just really important to learn how to use one of these. Okay, and one of the reasons I like this one specifically is it wraps up nicely and it takes up very little space, okay? So that's the multimeter. All right, let's talk it to a little bit. Another one, this is a non-contact voltmeter. This one's kind of nice for checking coils, right? You don't absolutely need it. This is a cheap one. This one also works. You don't absolutely need it, but it's kind of nice to have. This is a thermometer This is really for checking hot wires. I mostly use this actually for catalytic converters, the inlet and outlet, comparing the temperature. But something like this is good for electrical repair as well. Okay. And then the next thing we're going to get into soldering here in a bit. So we'll save that for a little bit later. All right, so now let's talk about battery maintenance. Super important is battery maintenance, okay? So I like to use a tool like this because it lasts for frickin' ever. It has a positive terminal cleaner and a negative terminal cleaner here. You could use something like this. The problem is that these just don't last very long. They get super corroded really easily. And I mean, they're great, don't get me wrong, but they're cheap. I mean, yes, they're cheap, they're consumable, but I'd rather just have something that I can buy and just kind of have pretty much forever. So this cleans out the female port and this cleans out the male terminal. So something like this is really nice. And then I also like to use, this is the terminal cleaner I like to use because it foams up. It says cleaner protector, but I only use it as a cleaner. It foams up, it's pretty nice. That's how I clean up those battery terminals. And then when I'm done, I spray this protector on there. It's like a red little color. It's just a nice little touch, you know. And I never use those little foam pads at the bottom of the post either. Okay. I also like to keep some of this liquid tape on there, and because it's kind of rubbery. Okay. I only picked this up in like the last 5 years or so, and that's because and we'll get to it in a bit when we talk about diagnosing wires. I like to puncture the wire. It saves me a ton of time, and it's so much easier to puncture the wire with something like this, where you can puncture the wire and get a reading off of it. Okay, but then you don't want to have that exposed wire. So you take some liquid tape in here, you just dab it in there. It dries up really quickly and it leaves a nice tight seal. Dielectric grease, we'll talk about this in a minute too. That kind of goes along with our solder repair. Okay, now let's talk about wire strippers, right? Because this right here, I had told you guys before, this isn't very good, and I mean it. It's not very good. It does the job, right? It does automatically strip wires. You really got to know how to adjust the tension on it, though. And if anything is in here at all, it won't work at all. It won't work for beans. And it works okay. I mean, it's not the best in the world. It's got a neat little crimper on the bottom, but it kind of sucks. This, on the other hand, is absolutely fantastic. This one's from Icon. Snap-on makes something very similar. The problem is that this goes down to 24 gauge wire. The Snap-on one only goes down to 22, and it has, I think, I forget the next size up from 14, maybe 12, I think it is, or 10, which you don't really need in the automotive field. Something smaller is better, in my opinion. And these are really great. They're super sharp. I've been using these for about a month now, and they're absolutely great. I highly recommend these. They're a little on the pricey side for something you'd expect from Harbor Freight, but still a very great tool. There's another one from Snap-on. This is actually just a glorified seam ripper. I bought it because I thought it was cool, and I broke it like the first day. It's a little bit thin infinitely, so my Snap-on guys, I haven't cared enough to get another one, but my Snap-on guys get me another one. This is another one I've been using for a while. This is a little bit thicker, but use this to cut through the wiring and the insulation on something, because it really does get up behind and then kind of like, well, it's tearing right now, but you can see it kind of cuts really nicely. So just a really good tool to have. Saves you so much time, and it also prevents you from damaging the wiring if you were to accidentally puncture it. Well, let's say you're using a razor blade and you don't want to accidentally cut the wire in half, or just cut too deep or something. Like, you get a lot more control out of something like this, and it's so easy to just slip it in there and just unzipper it. It's kind of like you're cleaning up game out in the field or something. So just really nice tool to have. I like this one. It's got a wood handle. I have shorter ones as well that you can get in like a 5 or 6 pack for like $20 or something. Really good tool to have. Highly recommend it. The next tool I want to talk about are these relay buddies. So these relay buddies are super great. I've talked about these in the past for cutting down your diagnostic time. It basically has the power and ground to send power directly to whatever thing you're testing to cut out the relay as a potential problem. Right? So I like to have that. Also like to have some assorted alligator clips on these fittings here. These are some of the specialty wiring that I like to have. I know it seems like a jumbled up mess, but really it's nice because they have these connectors on there that connect to either an alligator clip or to another connector there. So these are really nice. I'll talk about these in a second here too. So just all these fittings are, you know, just kind of nice to have when we're talking about connecting up to your multimeter. Now, do you have to have something like this? No, where they kind of come off and clean up nicely. No, you don't. What you absolutely do need, though, are some alligator clips, okay? Now, the colors don't really matter. These are cheap from Harbor Freight. I treat these as consumables because they kind of break all the time. What you need to do, though, before you use any of these wires, right? Before you use any alligator clips or any connections, even before you use your multimeter, is put your multimeter in resistance and touch the tips together, right? Test the end of this alligator clip, because what oftentimes happens is it'll break. You'll get a break right here and you'll lose continuity across this wire. So you'll be trying to jumper something across or test something, and if it's broken and you think it's good, it could really, really, really add to some headache to your life. So just really, really good tip before you use these. Check the resistance across to make sure that these are in good condition. And once again, when you use a multimeter, do the same thing, right? Okay, so something like that. I'm going to just throw these around because I don't have a good system for it right now. All right, next thing is this back probe kit. This is from Harbor Freight as well. This is absolutely fantastic. It comes with some assorted bits and tits and biddles here. But these are nice because you can use something like this. Obviously, you can use it to back probe a connector, but you can also use it to puncture the connector or puncture the wiring. So something like this is really nice. It comes in an assorted like 45 or 90 degree angles. It comes in super, super handy when you need it. Okay, this is just some more fittings and stuff like that. Another one of those little adapters and stuff. All right, the next thing that you're going to want to have is something like this. Okay, this is a probe pinning kit. You get these cheap off of Amazon. I think I paid like $5 for this. Comes in a case. It comes in like super, super redundant bit of these. But these are nice and thin. They have all the different shapes that you need. And this is in case you're trying to work on a connector and you want to pin out or remove the pins from like a plastic connector. You want to remove the pins out the backside. This kind of undoes those two little spring clips that hold it in place. If you've ever done it, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, then the first time you need to use one of these, you'll be glad you have it. It's a super cheap, super small, something to add in your toolbox. Even if you never use it, buy one of these because you kind of never know when they're going to come in handy. Okay, and to go along with that, it's something like this, like some electrical cleaner, quick disconnect electrical. I love this stuff. I use it all the time. There's been so many times where I just had a bad, ugly, nasty connector and spray some of this in there, clean it all out. You can see all the crap and black gunk that comes out of there. Really great, super safe. Never had an issue with it. So yeah, just highly, highly recommend having something like this. This will also make, let's say you're trying to remove a connector that's plastic on plastic and it's kind of hard to get out. Spray some of this in there to almost like lube it up. I'm sure you could use something else, maybe like WD-40 or something, but this I know is going to be safe for the connector, so that's why I use it. So I highly recommend that as well. Let's see, the next tool is going to be this inline spark tester. This is kind of like for diagnostic. Once again, this only tells you if the signal is being sent to the spark plug. It doesn't actually tell you if the spark plug is sparking, okay? So just one little difference there. Next thing is going to be kind of like consumables, okay? So the consumables I like to keep on board the van are different battery terminals and these like battery shims, okay? The battery shims are good. I mean, obviously, the best thing to do is replace the battery or replace the battery terminal. But sometimes the customers just can't afford that kind of stuff, and they just need a quick fix and a cheap quick fix. So these are nice. They're cheap. They're easy to install. They just go right over the post, and it gives you a little bit more thickness. Obviously, the best thing to do would be to replace it. I like these universal terminals. These have done me pretty well. This is if I'm like working on a classic car that has a bunch of connectors off of it, like for the fuel pump or whatever. Anyway, pretty good to have. There's a positive and negative, so just don't forget that they're different sizes. But it's nice to have these. I have some for light duty trucks as well. A little bit bigger. So just something like, and you'll be surprised how many times I've diagnosed a no-start diagnostic, and it's either the battery terminal is loose or maybe it's tight, and maybe you even clean it, but the connection between to the starter is just bad. So having good battery terminals is a big time saver. Okay, the other consumables I like to keep on are the fuses. These are ones you get from Harbor Freight. They've been really great. I go through a bunch of these mini ones all the time, as you can tell. But I probably go through one of these a year, maybe a little bit more frequently. And I think I've had the same one for about 2 years. And these, you pretty much never used it. Nobody uses these glass type fuses anymore. But I do work on a lot of classic cars, so I like to have it. I don't have the super big like maxi fuses, and I don't have like the specialty type fuses. If I need those, I get them, but good to have. Okay, now let's talk about soldering, okay? Now, if you're an automotive technician and you're not doing proper solder jobs for repairing customers' vehicles, you should just please stop, okay? If you're using connectors like this or butt connectors or just, just stop, okay? If you're splicing into a line and you're just using wire wraps or household wire wraps, honestly, man, just stop, okay? The best way to make a repair to a vehicle is to solder and shrink wrap it, okay? I don't care what anybody says, that's the best way. Yeah, there's some cool, like this right here has solder in it and glue on the ends, and yeah, it works kinda. I've used them in the past. They're just not great. A good solder job is kind of one of the best things you can do. I like to keep an assortment of wire on here as well. This is the most commonly used size, is this one right here. I have a whole bunch of different wiring, and then also the cable protectors as well on the van. But these are probably some of the most common ones. So yeah, good bit of wire. But let's keep it basic. Let's say we're going to solder 2 wires together, okay? If you guys have never soldered, check it. Maybe I'll make a video on it, but I like to keep a long bit of solder on here, okay? I like to kind of rip it off like that, and then I'll use a little handful of it to solder down. In my life, I've actually put solder in my mouth so I could use one hand to manipulate the soldering iron, and then you try to use 2 hands to do the wiring to put them together, and then I've used my mouth to put it together in weird spots. Highly don't recommend that, because this has lead in it, as you can tell. So lead's super not good for you to breathe in. So just, be safe. This right here is something I picked up pretty recently, actually. And let me just show you how it works. It's really simple. It's really small, but boom, check that out. You put this in there just like that, and then you put your other wire on the other side, and now you have a nice, easy, it moves around. You can put, now you can solder here a lot easier without everything going all over the place. So, and this fits into a car really nicely. I've in my life used something like this, where you pinch the 2 wires together. But honestly, this is too big and bulky, and it's not even magnetic. I'm sure they make better ones out there. This is a cheap one. I don't even remember where I got this, probably Amazon or something. But this is actually not that great. I found that this is by and far better. It has different sizes here, from smaller gauge up to larger gauges wire. So really, really good. Really good there. Highly recommend this. I don't even know what it's called. Check it out on Amazon. I'll try to find a link for you guys. And then this is the shrink wrap I use, okay? Yes, they make shrink wrap in a long tube and longer runs of it, but I found that that's just not super useful for me. What I found is these different color assortments with all these different sizes, okay? I used to keep a light, or I still keep a lighter in here for emergencies. The lighter is pretty good for shrink wrap. The problem is if you use a lighter too close, you'll actually burn it, and then as you saw that, the wind is all over the place. So what I did is I picked up this cheap heat gun from Amazon. Doesn't even say Milwaukee, but it uses the batteries, and it's got some high and low settings. It gets pretty hot, but this is pretty nice because it gets hot very quickly, and look at that, it starts shrinking that shrink wrap almost right away. You see that? And there's no real damage when you're using something like that for burning it. So that's the problem with using a lighter, is that if you burn it and you don't actually heat it, then it actually expands rather than shrinking, and that's not what you want. So really good to have something like that, a heat gun like this, and they're cheap. I think I paid $30 for it. It came with all these different attachments. This is the attachment I like to use the most because I feel like it gets a good reflective or radiative heat off of it, and really gets a good, nice, even heating across something like this. So really good. Electrical tape. You got to have electrical tape, especially if you know how to use it. So in the Navy, we call it the half lap double wrap, which is basically you wrap the tape around and you half the distance each time you come across, and you go all the way down, and then you come all the way across, okay? So it's called the half lap because it's like halving itself each time, and then the double lap because you do it twice, okay? And the secret to using electrical tape is to stretch it as you're installing it. If you're just going loosey-goosey, it's going to be all nasty, and you're going to get dirt inside, and it's going to come off. But if you take this electrical tape, and I'll show you guys real quick. If you take this electrical tape and you really stretch it, right, while you're using it, look at that. If you do it like this, you're going to get a really nice connection, right? And that's what you want. You want to have it be. And you can see how I kind of half the distance each time, maybe 3/4 of the distance each time I came across. And that's what you want. And my fingers turned pink right now, or purple, you can't even tell. But that's what you want, okay? And you want to keep this tape pretty clean as well. Because, like I said, if you were to just kind of go on it like loosey-goosey like I see a lot of people do it, see all that space in there, you're going to get dirt and grime and just all kinds of just nastiness. But stretch the tape out, okay, while you're installing it. It kind of self-sticks to itself, and then boom, you don't have the space in between it. It just looks a lot nicer. It lasts a lot longer too, okay? So that's how you use the electrical tape. Now, you can't get away from having connectors like this, okay? I wish there was a better system. Maybe there is. I just haven't come across it. But this is still why you want to crimp it. Now, what I do is I put the wire in, okay? I strip the wire, I put it in, I crimp it, and then I solder in there as well, okay? So I'll heat this up, and I'll put some solder on this side and on that side. And what that does is it just makes me feel better that I'm getting a nice tight connection. And then I almost always take this and get a size that actually kind of fits over it, is I'll take this and I'll butt it up to the connector and I'll shrink wrap that down as well, so it just looks nicer and there's less chance for moisture to get into it, even though it's exposed, right? I get that, but there's that. This I've kind of grown to love. It's not the most ideal thing in the world, but what this does is you put, let's say you have a run of wire that you don't want to splice into. The wire kind of goes in right here, okay? And then you get a new piece of wire that comes in right here, and then you tighten this down, and what it does is it punctures both wires through the insulation. It punctures both wires through the insulation, so you can basically connect them. And then if you could get a big enough piece of shrink wrap, you could shrink wrap over it if you wanted to. I haven't done it yet. But this is really kind of, I would say, for emergency repairs, or for maybe if I'm doing interior dash work. Let's say I'm installing a lowering control module or some kind of specialty module, and then I would use that, okay? I have all these different sizes as well, okay? So yeah, that's that. I do have some, actually I lied to you, I do have some of these maxi fuses, larger fuses and stuff, but I just don't use them all that much. But they're in there. Let's talk about this soldering iron. This thing is amazing, okay? This thing is really, really great. It moves different directions, okay? So you can have this like 3 different positions here. It's got a base stand, so you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about it touching the ground like this, okay, or melting anything. And I like to use these larger batteries because, boom, then it can stand up. So what I can do is I can turn it on and let it warm up while I'm doing whatever, cleaning up or doing something like that, and it just works great. Now, the important thing when you're using soldering iron is to make sure you're not doing a cold solder, okay? But a cold solder is basically you melt the solder onto the wire. What you want to do, and I'll do a video on this later, and I'm sure you can watch something else on YouTube, is you want to heat the wire up, okay? So the wire is hot and the wire is actually melting the solder. So when you go to put your solder in there, okay, you're not putting it directly onto the soldering iron, you're putting it onto the wire, okay? And that wire is melting it and it's oozing into the different holes and stuff. So that's what you want. And then dielectric grease I use for spark plug boots, but also when I'm done, I'll put some dielectric grease into after the solder, or I put it after it cools down, and then I'll bring the shrink wrap over. I'll shrink the shrink wrap, and you can kind of see this dielectric grease kind of ooze out the side. And this just helps to keep a good, it really does seals, lubricate, protect, and insulate. I mean, that's what it does, and it works great at it. So that's how I finish off my soldering jobs. Now, there are other things, there are other ways to solder, and there's more correct ways to solder, I will say, but this is what I do, and it works great, okay? I haven't had any issues with it in the years that I've been doing it like that, okay? But yeah, it's super great soldering iron, gets hot really fast, cools down really fast. It comes with 2 tips. It comes with this flat tip, and it comes with like a pointed tip. I like the flat tip a lot better because I feel like it heats up more surface area. It heats up the wiring so much better. The pointed tip would be good if I was doing like circuit boards and stuff like that, which I never do. So if you're going to use the flat one, okay? All right, guys, that's what I have for electrical. A little bit longer than I expected, but if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. But I hope you guys are enjoying this video. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.